Hi, it's Dennis Daly, inviting you to go along with me on yet another trip, this time back again to Indiana. We'll start here in Palm Springs and take AMTRAK. The train goes through Yuma, across Arizona and New Mexico to El Paso, San Antonio, Dallas, Fort Worth, up into Arkansas, and finally to St. Louis. In St. Louis, we'll rent a car and go to Indiana. Then after about 6 days, take the car back, and then take Southwest Airlines, not back to Palm Springs, but to Las Vegas, and eventually drive back here. We'll spend 54 hours on the rails of AMTRAK, but when we boarded the train in Palm Springs, it was the middle of the night. And when you do wake up in the middle of the night, sleeping in a sleeper car for the first time, and open the drapes and look out, well, you don't see very much, an occasional railroad crossing. But you know, that numbing sound of the train and the slight jerking back and forth really is conducive to sleep, and that's what I did. It's morning in Tucson, Arizona. We're at the train station here. I haven't had time to comb my hair or clean up or anything because I'm taking this AMTRAK train from Palm Springs to St. Louis. And for the first time on AMTRAK, I got a sleeper room. It's called a roomette. It's about the size of a payphone and a half. It's been an interesting trip so far, and Tucson is a great place to stop. Once you get going and you've had a little breakfast, you see a great diversity of scenery. Arid areas and other areas under cultivation. Sometimes in the distance you can see the interstate. And when there's a parallel track, you see that they're using concrete instead of wooden rails anymore. This is really God's country out here, and it goes on for miles and miles and miles. Well, it was a long trip across parts of Arizona and New Mexico. I don't know whether you can hear me over the noise and the wind. We're in El Paso, Texas now. You go through an awful lot of desert and an awful lot of areas of nothing to get here. I'm not saying it's bad scenery, but one of the cities we did go through that brought back a lot of memories was Lordsburg. Today it's just an exit on I-10, although AMTRAK does stop here. It's a good example of a decaying railroad community with a lot of decaying buildings, except for this one, the Stagecoach Inn, and notice the words Stagecoach. You see, long before Lordsburg, New Mexico was connected to the outside world by highways and rail and air, you got in and out of here by stagecoach. And so did John Wayne in the award-winning 1939 movie of that name, based on the book Stage to Lordsburg. It was Wayne's breakout movie. Orson Welles said that it was one of the most perfect movies ever made. And so you and I, in some ways, have been here to Lordsburg before. When you pull out of the city, you do notice something that you see in a lot of railroad towns, and that's a downtown section that barely has any life at all. It teaches you a lot about the evolution of transportation in this country, but people do live here. But I'll tell you this, no matter where you go by rail, you see a lot of America's backyards. Oh, and by the way, gas is still less than $2 a gallon here. Well, a lot of day has passed, and we're in Alpine, Texas. Let's look on a map and show you. Alpine isn't quite in the middle of nowhere, but as you go along, you see some gorgeous scenery out here and a lot of wildlife. I didn't have the camera ready when we saw 25 or 30 antelope about 20 minutes ago. This is Alpine, and then there just isn't much between here and our next stop tomorrow morning, which will be in San Antonio. I spent most of this full day here in the observation car, a beautiful place to watch the world go by, sitting in luxurious seating with all these great windows. But next to me for a while was a woman who seemed more concerned with her handheld device. I don't know whether she was trying to pick up a signal or not. You can't really use the cell phone out here in the middle of nowhere. If you're an airplane, though, you can get a signal from a tower like this. The scenery in the Big Bend part of Texas is very, very, very varied. Everything from little tiny towns to arid areas of nothing. But there is a lot of water and foliage out here, which is something we don't have in Palm Springs. I was really happy, though, that my GPS did receive signals out here, because looking out of my roomette, I got a great sense of what was going on, especially when the train slowed down. Here we are doing under 10 miles an hour. The reason? AMTRAK has to take second place to all the freight that goes across America. Here I am walking to my room. It was roomette number 11, and when I slide the door open, you'll see just how narrow the room is. Barely a room in there to place a wide seat with a little place to stand up. Oh well, it takes a long time to get your sea legs, though, on AMTRAK. Here I am going down one of the narrow aisles, and I'll make a turn to look down the area where you go downstairs. If you're older and chubby as I am, you really have to hold on. And when you walk down the aisles, you sometimes feel like a drunken sailor. I'm not kidding. These trains lurch around a lot. And then you go from car to car like this. You press, the door slides open, you go over these two plates, hoping the train doesn't derail right there, and the next thing you know, you're in the next car. So finally, you go back to your roomette and look at the approach of night. Check the GPS, you're in the middle of nowhere, and then night starts falling. And you know, after a day of wonderful eating, looking at the scenery and walking around like a drunken sailor, you want to go to sleep. And AMTRAK has placed this routing across the Big Bend section of Texas overnight. And there isn't much out here. So maybe it's a good thing to spend the overnight going through a part of Texas that's kind of ho-hum. Our next stop tomorrow morning will be San Antonio, where they will split the train in half. Some will go on to Chicago, and some will go on to New Orleans. And so my roomette was placed in a sleeper car that hopefully will be routed the right direction. You greet the morning in San Antonio, and saying hello is a big tower. It's a remnant from the 1968 World's Fair. It's an observation deck now. The fair was called the Hemisphere. The Seattle Space Needle from the 62 World's Fair there is an observation tower and a very similar remnant to a fair gone by. AMTRAK has its work cut out for it here in San Antonio, as do I, freshening up my little sleeper room. Now, you notice that it's a bottle of Febreze. It turns out that I would need it for a reason other than I originally anticipated. This is where the train is split up, part of it going to Chicago, my part, and part of it going on to New Orleans. They do all the switching at this point, and there's a sizable delay where they take care of everything. But there was one thing they weren't able to take care of. As we left San Antonio, I felt somewhat of a hero. You see, I was the only person with a can of air freshener. Maria, the maid, had told all of us that none of the toilets was working in my car. And when we left San Antonio, AMTRAK announced they probably wouldn't be fixed.
At this time, there is no one en route. We'll be able to fix them, so I appreciate your cooperation and help with the situation. Thank you.
I may have made the train car smell better, but I still had to walk up and down steps and go to another car whenever I needed to use the restroom. And we kept moving on. Well, we made it to Temple, Texas. It's a short stop here. It's a neat... I'm being ushered... Oh, look what's coming. I'm being told to move over a little bit. Hi there. I still haven't found my hairbrush. I keep cutting myself shaving, but other than that, I'm having a good time. And part of that fun is always eating aboard AMTRAK, either at your seat, after you picked up something at the cafe, or going to the diner. Now, the diner is included if you take a sleeper, which is a pretty pricey way to go, but I did this time. I was a little disappointed to see this shabby sign. AMTRAK isn't what it used to be. The menu's still great, though. It is a little pricey, but as I say, it was included in my fare. But you also get something else. You get camaraderie. You get to meet some pretty fantastic people on board. You have to sit where they tell you to sit. Finally, we get to Claiborne, Texas, a little city that is honoring its past by having a railroad museum next to the train station. Claiborne remembers. On its long routing from San Antonio up to Chicago, the Texas Eagle goes through 3 major metropolitan areas. One we haven't gotten to yet, that's Little Rock, Arkansas. This is the first of the 2 biggies in Texas, Fort Worth. Then, after about an hour, we end up in Dallas, Big D. And this is a busy type of station here. The Trinity Railway Express comes through here, the light rail downtown, and we are only about 2.5 blocks from a very special place. There's a lot of rail traffic here. There's a lot to look at. And if you know exactly where to look, you'll see something very, very special. We're on the triple overpass right now, and over there is the Texas School Book Depository. And here's the window from which Lee Harvey Oswald fired at John Kennedy, hitting him twice. According to records, the trajectory of the bullet was out of the window and down, and really not that far away. And remember, Oswald was a trained marksman. Here's the grassy knoll, by the way. You hear so much speculation about somebody who might have been there. The Kennedy motorcade came into downtown Dallas on this street, making its way slowly to the corner and then making a sharp left turn headed for this overpass. The rest, of course, is history. I wonder how many people come into Dallas on AMTRAK using this route and never notice what's off to their left. And so, near a special place, at a very busy spot, the city's light rail coming in there, this has become a real transportation hub in downtown Dallas. Next, we head east across this part of Texas to Marshall, then north and into Arkansas, and across Arkansas overnight, and in the morning, St. Louis. They may not have been able to fix the toilets, but they did clean the windows for a little bit better view as we left the Dallas area. You know, there's a very stark comparison between AMTRAK going through the deserts of Arizona and New Mexico and what we see here. After leaving Dallas, the AMTRAK routing is kind of interesting. You'd think we'd head northeast to St. Louis, but nope. The train follows the interstate all the way out to Marshall, Texas, then makes an abrupt left turn to Texarkana, it should be dark by then, and then heads out across Arkansas. And in many of the big cities, there are remnants of the golden days of railroading and what the railroads used to be called. In some of the urban areas, there are now sound walls along the tracks, just as you would see along an interstate highway. And speaking of interstates, the railroad was here first. Most highways followed the old railroad tracks. And so we head out toward St. Louis, another night, another sleep in our tiny little sleeper, and heading to the city with the Gateway Arch. I saw on the map that we would wake up to a beautiful view of the Mississippi River. That's it. Tremendous fog in St. Louis as we arrived. I had so looked forward to taking pictures as we went up the mighty river. It just didn't happen.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're pulling ahead for our final stop here in St. Louis. Once we come to a complete stop, all doors will open and you can exit the train at that time. Once again, welcome to St. Louis.
And we made it to St. Louis, 53 hours. It's foggy here. I still cut myself, haven't shaved, and I still can't find my hairbrush. Thanks for coming along. I'm Dennis Daly.